Some of the ways that the NIFSC project supports communities are by helping communities to understand how fire and life safety standards are beneficial, by providing the training to achieve, monitor, and maintain standards, by supporting access to adequate funding for sustainable services, and by assisting communities in ensuring that capital infrastructure is of quality. So the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council project is all about creating the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council. And then once the organization is stood up, then that will take over all the work that the project has been developing. The AFAC Board of Directors is committed to the inclusion of all Indigenous peoples, both in AFAC's current inception and in the development of the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council. Currently, the board is undergoing governance changes that include extending invitations to Inuit and Métis people to serve on the AFAC board, and also to participate in the strategic development of the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council. And the governance goal of the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council is to reflect all Indigenous peoples. Because of limitations on federal policy, we currently can only deliver services on reserve. But we are working with the government to remove these barriers. And all of the programs that we're developing at the moment can be used by all Indigenous communities, regardless of where they are living. And all programs we will continue to develop in this way to be used by everyone. The National Indigenous Fire Safety Council project always has been and always will be driven by community needs. That's why you see community needs here at the top of this cyclical loop. It is designed by Indigenous communities for Indigenous communities. Between October 2018 and November 2019, we ran engagement sessions to provide information and to gather information and input on the project. And we're very grateful to everyone that participated in that and provided information to help us design the programs and services. We listened to communities so that we could better understand the challenges and the gaps across the country. And we heard very clearly that immediate action is needed to address the multitude of fire and life safety issues in Indigenous communities. As we develop these programs and services, we test them in community, take that feedback and put that back in to improve the programs and services. And then it constantly evolves as the situation changes, both in terms of any threats that are posed and also in terms of community capacity changing. So how is the NIFSC going to make a difference for you and your community? By being an ongoing organization with sustainable funding, it means that the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council will always be around. It means that communities can be confident that you can come to us with your questions and know that you're going to receive sound advice and that you're going to get quality programs and services. Our National Instant Reporting System is going to make an enormous difference. Currently, there's no data being captured, so that means when we design fire prevention programs, we're doing that based on our best guess as to what is actually causing the root cause of the fires. If we have data, we can then develop targeted programs to address the actual problems that are occurring. The NIFSC will be an independent national organization that decides what programs it's going to offer based on the reality on the ground and the actual needs of Indigenous communities. Using the data captured in the instant reporting system, we're going to be able to develop a plan to address fire and life safety issues according to fact-based priorities, not according to political agendas. Currently, firefighter training isn't accessible to most Indigenous people, especially not without leaving your home community to study and work. We're going to be developing training programs, delivering training programs that allow people to remain in their community. And we're going to create flexible working arrangements that meet the needs of the extremely diverse people across the country. Let's go and let some more people in here. Now, the current offering of fire and life safety programs and services is basically designed for urban populations. We're going to create programs and services that are specifically designed for Indigenous communities. And so that will be both from a geographic and a cultural perspective, so that when people are participating in this training, they're going to be able to see how it directly applies to them and to their communities. All of the programs and services that we're developing can be used by all Indigenous communities across the country. As I said, even if funding parameters currently limit program delivery to on reserve, we're developing with the intent of everyone using these programs. Why is that not clicking? Indigenous communities across Canada are experiencing an unacceptable number of fire-related injuries and deaths. There's a 2008 report by the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation that found that Indigenous peoples in Canada are 10 times more likely to die in a fire and 2.5 times more likely to be affected by property loss per capita. Now, any of you that have been following the project have heard the same statistic from us over and over. And in case you're wondering why that we keep repeating this, it's because that's actually the only data that there is, which is shocking and unacceptable. There's no National Fire Protection Act that mandates fire safety standards or enforces them. There's no mandated enforcement of occupational health and safety. There's no national coordination of Indigenous fire service standards, programs, or any level of service standards. Each ISC region can provide programs or fund regional services at their discretion. So support in each region can vary depending on how that ISC region wants to provide their funding. There's no fire incident reporting. Data collection was happening, but it was inconsistent and focused on band-funded capital assets. So it was really looking at capital rather than fire loss reporting. And the fire service funding and fire protection is based solely on fire suppression and uses formula funding, which is included in flexible funding. That means communities aren't actually required to use fire protection funding for fire protection. Housing and capital infrastructure isn't subject to any national building inspection process. And currently the process puts the liability for the build on the community, not the builder. Whereas off reserve, it's the builder that has responsibility. And while capital projects are required to be built to National Fire Protection Code, this is based on policy and there's no inspection process. By taking a national approach to fire and life safety, the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council is responding to this gap in fire protection standards and addressing issues collaboratively on a national scale, coordinating fire service standards, programs, and services in our Indigenous communities will become possible. So some examples of the gaps that we're talking about. In Indigenous fire services are assuming responsibility for departments and community safety, but they have limited training and experience because there's no national standards. Because of inadequate funding and lack of expertise and training, it's really hard to adopt fire service equipment standards. And with the exception of on-reserve communities, every other jurisdiction, so that's provinces, territories, and other federal jurisdictions like military bases, airports, seaports, they all have established building and fire codes. So building codes serve to ensure that the infrastructure is built properly, and fire codes ensure that the infrastructure is maintained to establish standards. Also, there's no national standards for the delivery of fire prevention or public education. So how is the NIFSC going to bring about change? We're going to work collaboratively. We're going to share our expertise and resources, and we're not going to duplicate programs and services, and we're going to share our research. Our goal is to help communities to make communities safer. And really, everything about the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council project is about building internal capacity. So our governance and corporate development efforts are the activities and steps that build the organization and make sure that the project is supported by Indigenous peoples and organizations. The work will establish the NIFSC as an independent, Indigenous-run organization that's mandated to improve fire and life safety for Indigenous peoples and communities across the country. Having a solid research program allows the development and delivery that is based on evidence. The research program makes sure we have academic rigor throughout the process and looks for opportunities to enhance the mission of the organization and to advance fire and life safety initiatives. The Indigenous Fire Marshal Service is our program delivery arm, and we're going to take a closer look at that in the next slide. The National Instant Reporting System allows for data capture, identification of trends, and the sharing of fire prevention, training, standards, resources. It really allows for the development of programs that have the most impact. The name Indigenous Fire Marshal Service is used because the role of a fire marshal is well understood, and it relates to what's being delivered by this arm of the NIFSC project. We work with communities to identify and meet individual needs, to develop and test culturally appropriate programs, including in the areas of fire prevention, education, home safety, train the trainer, governance, fire department administration, leadership training. And our programs are delivered in 2 languages and using 3 different delivery mechanisms, although the requirements of each program may dictate delivery formats. And our program development is guided by the National Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee. So the project is working with Indigenous communities and is really focused on developing and testing programs related to fire prevention and public education, because those have the greatest impact on public safety. When you see the program areas listed, we always list them in the same area because they're ordered in the ones that have the greatest impact on saving lives are highest on the list. Our community safety education programs really focus on specific fire safety issues and are designed to increase awareness. These are programs addressing specific issues such as heating and cooking, and they're designed for everyone in the community, from the children to elders and everyone in between. These kind of programs are things like youth fire setter intervention, getting to know fire, learn not to burn. Next is our fire service governance programs, and these are designed to support community decision makers and leaders with developing policies and bylaws, communication plans, fire and emergency plans. And these really help community leaders to identify fire and life safety issues and ways to reduce and mitigate those risks. So some of these programs are our community fire safety assessment, our community risk reduction plan, and our risk mitigation and analysis services. The community infrastructure, engineering, and support programs help communities to design and plan fire-related infrastructure, including things like water systems and hydrants. They identify what individual communities need and put appropriate people in place to design and build the necessary infrastructure. Examples of these programs are fire protection research services, plans examination services, and also plans examination training. Our fire department management programs provide support for fire chiefs and officers at the administrative level with creating policies, providing guidelines, planning, and also acquisition of apparatus and equipment. These programs are things like the fire department assessment, fire officer training, policy and operational guidelines support. Fire inspection services identify fire-related risk in communities and help community leaders with minimizing these risks. And they also help provide building and equipment inspections. Examples of these kinds of programs are our fire code inspection services, fire extinguisher inspection and maintenance services. Our investigations programs provide communities with support for both fire investigations and data collection. And these programs include provisions for training non-investigators in addition to actual accredited training. These programs are things like fire investigation services for cause and origin, helping to ensure collection of fire reporting data, fire investigator training, and fire scene preservation training. Finally, we have the fire department operations training, and that's looking at really the training, equipment, repairs, maintenance, education, everything to support the actual firefighters and responders at the incident response level. And these include accredited firefighter training using NFPA standards and fire prevention program training. Sorry, I need to let someone else in here. It's not letting them in. There we go. So take a brief look at what we've done so far, and I'll let you know that our website does have a dashboard where you can view the current status of various project components. So if you just actually go to the homepage of the website, and it's got a link right there to the dashboard, and this is just a screenshot of that. We've performed extensive research and analysis in the areas of governance, mandate, and accountability to really identify what is the most appropriate options for the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council governance, so the board, and for the actual organizational structure. Our research team has created an evaluation instrument to measure program delivery and outcomes, and has conducted a study to help with collaborating with local communities to develop evidence-based fire risk reduction strategies. So far, we've developed 14 programs, and we have hundreds of deliveries in progress. The interim National Incident Reporting System is currently being implemented, and we have data from over 2,000 fire incidents in Indigenous communities that's being added to the database. Our National Advisory Committee helps us to maintain an inclusive approach that meets the needs of all Indigenous communities by providing advice on the project as it evolves. And our Technical Advisory Committee gives technical advice on the development and delivery of our programs. Part of this process is for them to review programs from both a regional and a national level. And the TAC really brings together a wide variety of education, experience, and expertise to share best practices and solve common issues. This committee allows for Indigenous fire safety experts to guide the NIFSC programs, and there's an open invitation to all the regional technical organizations to participate in the Technical Advisory Committee. Now, the doors of the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council will open on April 1st, 2022. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done between here and there, so I'm just going to give a very brief overview. What we do know is that the NIFSC will consist of a head office and that there will be regional presence, and we will be providing that in each of the 7 regions, so BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and the Atlantic. And the main component of the NIFSC is going to be the IFMS, the Indigenous Fire Marshal Service. Those are the boots on the ground that are responsive to regional and community needs for fire and life safety program delivery. We're going to be finalizing funding to make sure it's adequate and doesn't compete for funding with Indigenous communities and organizations. We're going to determine the footprint of the organization. So how many people and where are they going to be located? We're going to be working on policy, infrastructure, and assets and getting those all in place. So getting actual office space, computers, vehicles, things like that. Our research team is busy developing collaboration MOUs, memorandums of understanding, to work with other research organizations and share relevant information. They've also been examining mortality and morbidity in Indigenous communities to establish baseline data of fire-related casualties that then we'll be able to measure our performance against, or the performance of our programs against. And they're examining insurance grading and costs and developing a business case for residential sprinklers. We will, of course, continue to develop and deliver programs in the 7 program areas. That's community fire safety education, fire safety governance, fire service governance, community infrastructure and engineering support, fire department management, inspections, investigations, and fire department operations. And the National Incident Reporting System team is going to develop and implement the permanent and evolving system. And if you're interested in finding out more, I invite you to go to our website and you can actually view our funding agreement there. And so if you go to the project and then click on Document Library and search for CFA, and that will bring that up, and you can get a very in-depth look at all of our deliverables. I absolutely cannot overemphasize how important it is that we work with communities and organizations. So please connect with us, and our team can collaborate with you so that we can all make a difference. So you can see here is our contact information, and please do visit our website and stay in touch with us, and you can call us on that toll-free number or send us an email, and we'll connect you with whoever is the appropriate person to answer your questions and get you the services that you need. So that's the end of my section. We're going to hand over to Blaine. I'll just remind you, if you do have any questions, you can use the chat feature in Zoom, which I'm fairly confident that most of us are familiar with using Zoom for now. But if you don't see a menu, if you move your mouse, that usually then will pop up the menu, and you can just click on the chat there and send a chat. It'll just come directly to me, and then I will read that question out for Blaine. And I actually do have a couple of questions already for you, Blaine. So let me unmute you here, and then we can get you. All right.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. It is working this time. Perfect. So one of the questions that's come up here, and actually this has come up in every session and most of the time when I talk to people, is around employment opportunities and how people can get involved. And also if they don't necessarily, if they've seen a posting, but they don't have the training or the qualifications that it's looking for.
That's a good question. So one of the things that we absolutely do want to do is create fire service careers and employment opportunities for First Nations, Métis Inuit. So we strongly encourage those that are interested to apply, but we also encourage those that don't feel they're qualified or have the background or expertise also to apply and reach out to us. One of the things we recognize we're going to be doing as we start front-ending the organization, we're not necessarily going to have a lot of highly qualified staff. We're fortunate to have some, but we are factoring in a training and mentoring program into especially our frontline fire officers. Those, drawing from my experience working with First Nations Emergency Services in BC, and my learned colleague, Leon Smallboy, who spent time with TSAG in Alberta, we both recognize that is one of the avenues of to actually get really good qualified and accredited employees, is to bring them in, mentor them, help train them, give them the experience, and hopefully we hang on to them. And if we lose them to the highly paid municipal fire departments, that just creates another opportunity to bring in another individual that wants a fire service career. So for us, it's a really positive way to go about it. And if we can mentor and train our staff, we know that we can pass on those skills around mentoring and training to fire departments. So that literally is our business of building capacity, both within our own organization and supporting communities to build their capacity. So, yep, and right now we actually have current postings in our program and development area, in our delivery areas. For those from BC, and I'll just kind of segue what may be a question. We're working very closely with the First Nations Emergency Services in BC to make sure we don't duplicate services. We are still designing our delivery model, and that's part of the analytic work and research work that is being done right now. We're factoring in everything from geography, risks, community risks, where populations are distributed, where the communities are located, geography. There's just so many elements. So we don't have the perfect blueprint yet. But one of the things we'll be doing here in BC, again, is working closely with FNESC so that we make sure that we can maximize. And we've already had some preliminary discussions. Actually, FNESC has been kind enough to host us at their offices in North Vancouver for our meetings. And we are looking to rent some space off of FNESC hopefully soon. And again, it's around collaboration, cooperation. And we certainly will not do it in isolation. So anyway, I'll throw it back for any other questions.
Great, thank you. So I'm just, it's a question regarding throw in the aerosol fire suppression devices. And
Yes.
so we have been approached by providers around using these. And so the question is like, how they're asking, how can we move this forward and how can we get those devices out there? Because they believe that that will really make a difference in the outcomes of some of these fires that we're seeing.
That is, you know what, I'm just excited by that question because we have a really good answer for it. First and foremost is that, you know, we've all been in this business a long time. We've all, you know, have had vendors come and do a nice song and dance, and I won't throw the vendor under a bus, but we had a vendor demonstrate a ceiling mounted suppression type system that is, you know, basically plug and play, put it in, and if you get a kitchen fire, it's supposed to just magically put it out. You know, it was pretty well tested by one of our partner provincial fire marshal offices, and the results of that test was pretty disappointing. They literally had to, you know, light the thing on gasoline to get it to go off properly. But, you know, again, not to throw a vendor under the bus, but one of the things we want to do first and foremost is work collaboratively with our regional organizations. So if we're getting approached by vendors, we want to embrace new technology, but the technology has to work. So one of the plans for the head office is to start doing qualitative and quantitative research, basically data research, so that we can start looking at trends. But after we get up and running very quickly, we're already forming a partnership with NRCan. They're literally going to be an hour and a half down the road. They have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of research capacity. So what we would want to do is start doing live burn type scenarios with these devices and really separate the wheat from the chaff and figure out what does work and not necessarily endorse it, but at least have live video examples so that a department, if they're going to spend, you know, $100 or $1,000 on a piece of equipment that's new initiative, they can actually see, yes, this actually works. It does what it says it's going to do. You know, and then also testing it. When I was fire chief in the Arctic, I mean, testing cold water or cold environment apparatus and equipment, that was it's a huge thing that's not done very well. Testing systems in rural and remote capacity, rural and remote environments. Testing systems in what we find is our normal housing stock versus how CSA tests everything in perfectly built homes with nice drywall and you know, all the engineering done to code and current code. So there's a huge opportunity. So I'm taking the question beyond just the vendor selection, and I'm taking it into what we really need to do is we need to research this stuff. And I think we can be a real driver. Then that also links to insurance and what we can do with insurance. And that's a whole, we need a whole session to talk about what we're doing right now with research and insurance, reaching out to insurance agencies. One of the things, just because it's on my mind, one of the things that Len Garris, our Director of Research, is working on is there is a built-in type of tax with insurance that nobody kind of knows is there. It's just built into the whole structure. So we're doing research to identify whether that is an applicable tax for First Nations. And if it's not, there's an opportunity for a reduced cost for insurance. So again, the collateral benefits of what's happening right now through this initiative is it just is compounding and mostly in good ways. So anyway, thank you for the question. Whoever did that, I'd like to give you a gold star.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next question. Are there any plans to offer our programs and services in the territories?
Yes, actually. Now, again, with the limitation in funding, we can't deliver the programs right now, but there's been strong interest. The government of Nunavut is through their Fire Marshal's office has been working very collaboratively with us. And what we want to do is be sharing programs. If they've got really good programs that are already working, and a really good example of some of the programs that are working well, because I'm familiar with them, is how they've translated programs into Inuktitut and regional languages. So there's an opportunity for us, for unilingual speakers, elders, to take our programs there. The Northwest Territories, the Chuckadoor, the Fire Marshal up there, we've had some really good conversations. They're very interested in what we're doing. And so there's certainly an opportunity there. The Fire Marshal's office, he's now the Assistant Deputy Minister, Dennis Berry. We've taken some of the models that they've actually shared the models of what they're doing in the Yukon, and we've incorporated some of those models in how we're doing deliveries right now, which is let's hire people from the communities to do deliveries instead of sending an outsider in. And as we all are certainly aware, that has turned out to be an unbelievably brilliant thing to do during COVID, is not have people come in from the outside. So, Leon Smallboy has joined us from Alberta, is working a lot with a lot of different communities right now, and it really is, it's the way forward. It is about building capacity in the community and putting literally our money where our mouth is, so that we're hiring local, we're getting dollars into the community, but we're also getting capacity, and we're getting the programs delivered. So yes, we will be working collaboratively. Again, it's the funding mechanisms, but there may be different funding mechanisms. If there's assistance required by the territories, where there's a will, there's a way to make these things happen and make them happen universally.
Great, thank you. Okay, so then our next question is asking around what is the plan for enforcement of inspections?
It's a good question, and that is, let's we won't dance around it. Let's go straight to it. It really is going to be what the communities decide. As we all know, we don't have a national fire code that is there for First Nations community to utilize. So it really is, and one of our really strong messaging to First Nations communities is around accountability, that governance needs to be accountable for the communities. They need to make some tough decisions. And it's not a matter of enforcement, as we all know. It really is education and awareness. Even the fire marshals that do have the ability to enforce, it's that last straw. But one of the things we want to do is educate communities around, and we don't see it as much. We have capacity and funding issue. The more rural, the more there's not a local economy, and the dependency on IS funding around for housing and housing maintenance. It's the dollars that impede. But where we see urban First Nations environments where a not so moral company will set up shop because they can get away with stuff on a First Nations reserve. And the Lake Babine fire here in BC gave us some very, very good lessons on maintaining requirements around regulations around health and occupational health, safety standards, building codes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the bottom line is we need to educate why First Nations governance needs to enforce. Our stance from AFAC is that we do absolutely support a national fire and building code, fire safety act, whatever we want to call it. But it is our leadership, our First Nations leadership, that have to take the initiative and push this through. We will be there side by side, walk that journey with the AFN or whichever national organization wants to take it on. We'll be the subject matter experts, but we are not a political group. We are around fire life safety and community safety, community capacity. So it is a sensitive topic for some communities, but at the end of the day, we don't want excuses or a lack of call to action when we're explaining a death. Nobody wants that. And I think I'm yet to meet a chief and council that says, they can't, they disagree with that statement. But it's interesting. I'll just use one community here in BC that most of you are aware with, Tecumseh, Kamloops Indian band, for those that don't know the translation. They enforce provincial fire and safety codes, and they utilize the city of Kamloops to do it. And they have a fantastic taxation revenue and lease revenue mechanism there, but they keep it very, very compliant. And so there's an example of a community that's doing it right, but they're also benefiting from doing it right. So.
Great, thank you. And some of your answer there tied in very well to the next question around what is the plan for if Chief and Council isn't on board?
Education. At the end of the day is, Chief and Councils need to be educated. So I tell, for those who've heard me speak, you probably heard the story, but I'll tell it one more time. And actually I'll tell two stories. One, when I was with Finesse, when there was a fatality on reserve, I would get 50, 60 calls from media wanting interviews. That was 12 years ago. Now, if there's a fatality with 5 or 6 or 7 people lost, you might get 1 or 2 interviews. I don't know if it's, news cycle and there's just too much going on, but nobody's caring about our community, so we need to care about ourselves. That's first and foremost. But when it does hit the news, and every one of you can, think back, and the last time you saw a fatality, first thing the Chief and Council says, now is not the time to point fingers, now it's time to grieve. And I agree with that 100%. However, it's not a matter of pointing fingers, but I've stood up and talked to firefighters, First Nations fire chiefs across the country, and I've asked anybody, when's the last time you looked at a cause and determination report where there was a fatality and learned something from that? We're not even learning from the deaths that we do have, and we've got to stop that. That's on us, so that's the message, at the end of the day, is that it's not a matter of pointing fingers, but it is a matter of learning from our own mistakes in our own communities and sharing what we learn. And that's one of the things actually we'd like to see. It's been a goal of ours, is to actually ensure that every major fire where there's a huge capital loss or injury or death, that those cause and determination reports are done, fire investigation reports, for the layman, and that they're there and available for all First Nations to see. Not just, a statistic, but each report, every report that's got a name attached to it, with fatalities. And, we've had communities that have lost 9 people in one house fire, and I feel ashamed I can't remember those names, but we have so many names to remember. It's sad, but hey, let's put our effort into changing it. So sorry for the hard discussion, but I think that when I say we need to have hard discussions with the Chief and Councils and our leadership, and our political leadership, we have to have those tough conversations. This is our problem, and only we can solve this problem.
Thank you. The next question is looking at how can the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council help to fill the disconnect between what makes a fire department in the eyes of NIFSC and what makes a fire department in the eyes of the Fire Underwriters Survey?
Oh, that's a good question. So yeah, that's one of the things that we are working on is basically developing capacity for specifically the Fire Underwriter Survey, so we can basically, at the end of the day, meet the insurance needs that we're looking at. At the end of the day, NIFSC doesn't determine what a fire department is. It's the community that needs to determine what the fire department is. And I think that is, you know, a true statement. And I think our colleagues there are certain thresholds around funding policies that have to be met, but it's not the determination. Each community needs to determine what their fire suppression, what their fire plan, what their safety plan looks like. And that's where the responsibility does lie. And I think, you know, NIFSC would nod in agreement. I'm not putting you on the spot there, Monty, that it's the communities that need to make that determination. And NIFSC is there as a funder, you know, and we are crossing that threshold where, you know, Indigenous organizations and communities were both accepting the responsibility that this is our responsibility, not NIFSC's responsibility. So it is what it is, and we got to do something better about what it is.
Great. Okay, so I have another question here, and actually I think this came up in our earlier session as well this afternoon, around how are we going to decide where the officers are?
Yeah, so as I said, we're going to do some. We've got research to do. We need to know numbers of FTEs, where to put them. You know, and it's not just a matter of, you know, we're not going to do a formula funding. You know, this makes sense. We're going to do it everywhere. We want to look at each region. We want to have those discussions with the region. We want to make those determinations. You know, and one of the things I can guarantee we will not do is we'll not set up an office in Vancouver and put however many, I'm just going to use a number, let's say it's 10 staff members. All 10 staff members are not going to sit in Vancouver, spend all their time driving to communities. You know, BC, you know, I know the geography, so it does make sense to, you know, we've all learned to work at home, by God, this year. So, but you got to get people closer to communities so they can build a relationship, so they can be there to support the communities, so that they have, you know, one fire officer doesn't have 60 communities to work with. You know, we need a better ratio, and really we need to catch up to our neighbors. You know, where every regional district in the province of BC has, you know, at least a fire service protection manager, or whatever they call them. Some of them have a manager and a deputy and a training manager, and we need to catch up. You know, so we will have a distributed model, that I do know, so that we can get you know, especially with the rural and remote communities. Obviously, you know, we're going to have, you know, boat in, fly in communities, logging road communities. You know, so we're going to have some communities that you know, are at a geographic disadvantage, but we'll do whatever we can from a disbursement process. And anybody who's ever worked for me knows, if they ever say we got to get our deliveries done this summer because the roads, you know, because of the winter roads, they'll know my response is the communities travel 365 days a year, so do we. So that is the plan, is to be equitable with our distribution, and of course it will be there to argue for as much resources as we can. They're the community's resources, they're not ours. So but it will be done through working with the regions, not necessarily us making decisions as a national body. And of course, like I say, we'll be very much collaborating with First Nations Emergency Services to ensure that we can maximize and utilize existing resources. Every time we don't have to spend a dollar duplicating something is a dollar we can spend on the community. So it really is. It's about doing what we can for the communities with what we got.
Classic talking on mute there. Thank you. So I've got one more question in the line here. So everyone that is out there, if you are thinking of a question, type it to me, and then we can get the answers for you. So this question is actually asking about emergency management, and is the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council going to look at broader safety?
Our standard response, so in our work with the Assembly First Nations, you know, we have the fire file that's been given to us through a resolution by the AFN. However, as we all know, that there's overlap with emergency management, with wildfire, search and rescue. There's all these overlaps of what fire departments do. So our standard response is fire and structural fire and community capacity building is our bread and butter. That's what we do. That is our focus. However, if the leadership asks us to do something, be it First Nations, regional First Nations, or a community says, can you help us with X? We will do what we can to bring that to bear. So we are doing some emergency operation center training, it's a threshold into emergency management, but it's also emergency operations center training is very relevant to fire departments. And actually, for those that know the history of emergency operations, emergency management, that started with wildfire and interface fires. So, you know, the heart and the source of emergency management really is within the fire service. So, like I say, we will continue to work with the AFN and other national NIOs, national indigenous organizations, to ensure that this issue is addressed. You know, we'll work with the provincial bodies in BC. The BC Office of the Fire Marshal currently has an agreement to provide emergency management. But again, it's making sure that we get done what the communities need done to support their capacity. And that, again, at the end of the day, it's about transfer of technology, transfer of knowledge, ensuring that the communities gain as much knowledge as we are there to give them. And you know, hopefully, we work this organization out of business. It's not needed, you know, and that is the ultimate goal, is that the communities have more knowledge than we can ever bring, and they don't need us anymore.
Great. Well, that is all of the questions that we have received. So we will start to draw to a close here. Before I hand over to Alan for our closing, I'd just like to thank you all again for your time and let you know you will receive an email with a brief survey asking you about this session. And please do take the time to answer those questions, because we genuinely do actually read all of the feedback, and we do our very best to incorporate it into everything that we do. So you sharing your thoughts with us will help us to make future offerings better. And we do intend to offer more of these informal discussions so that we can connect with everyone, as Alan said, safely. And we will be publishing these videos as well, the recordings of the sessions, on our YouTube channel at some point in the future. So you can always revisit those and also look and see if there was anything different in other regions. And there are more sessions coming up next week. So if you know anyone that didn't perhaps get a chance to attend, the regional concept is based on the time zones. Anyone can attend any session. So you are most welcome to attend another session as well, but please spread the word and help us to get the message out there, and so that we can help with educating your community leadership so that they can be on board and support your efforts. Okay.
And just shout out to one of our participants. SIMC has a fundraiser coming up, so check their website out if you're anywhere near them. As we have to do, we rely on fundraisers to keep our departments afloat. So I'm happy to be able to participate, and hopefully can get that rib dinner before the next session we got to do that day. So good on you guys for putting it out there, and please utilize our website and social media to support any of your fundraising activities. We're happy to put that information out there.
Yes, I'm definitely looking forward to those ribs next week. Okay, I am going to hand over to you now, Alan. Let me just get the unmute to work. Okay. Over to you, please, Alan, for the closing.
Right. Almost easy to get while you work to them support range. While you're making no time to be in a ciudad, which may be Benegas of Fiji. Edogina Mos of Fiji. Edogina Moxo Mino. Pero Dinamo and ada tidak alam setan ini kiसी परिवर्तन या नसेलिए जिसमें चिपन उलट अम्मो दाने मोदी कुछ गलियां से किने ये सब दिखाने होगा मगर फिजिक्स में बने हुए तो जिन्हें उन्हें फिजिक्स में वो आने के समझना ताकि and translation I almost forgot I thank the creator for getting us together and that we're able to discuss the importance of our fire safety and our communities, and especially like right across Canada and and the safetyness that we're able to do this without anybody getting sick on COVID or anything. We thank Creator.
Wonderful, Alan. Thank you very much again for your time. And thank you everyone for joining us, and please stay safe.